What's going on, everybody? My name is Brenden. I'm the host here at BigBearB Photography, and we are back with another photo editing video. This video is going to be a little bit different because this is actually the third time that I recorded this video. The first time, I actually forgot to hit record on the camera, and then the second time, the camera, it only records up to a certain amount of time, and then it shuts itself off. I didn't notice that, so we only actually recorded about half of the video, but I needed to get last week's video out to you guys because I normally shoot these photo editing videos before I actually edit the videos for the on-location trips, just because obviously we have to have the edited photographs for those videos. So if you didn't see the Twin Falls video from last week, I suggest you go check that out. You can actually see how I took these photos, the location I was at, and all that kind of stuff. And in this video, we're going to show you how, I said weird, it's just me, but in this video, I'm going to show you how I edited those photos to get that final results. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit different because I've already edited these photographs. So instead of just kind of walking through normally like how we have been doing, where I'm making the adjustments live, I've turned off all of them but the raw development sliders, which you'll see shortly. But I turned off all of the edits that I made on that, on all of the different kind of things you can do. You'll see it again shortly. But I turned all those off, again, besides the raw development ones. So we'll just kind of go step by step, turn all those ones on, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about why I made that adjustment and the impact that it brings to the photographs themselves. So without further ado, let's jump on over to the computer and get started with these edits. And I already have my phone going off. Alright, so as you can see here, this is the first photo, and as I was saying, the raw development, I can't turn them off. Like you see how these have the eye icons. If you turn that, if you click that, it turns the adjustments on. That's not an option on the raw development, so I'll just go ahead and show you up here with this eye icon. This is what it looked like straight out of the camera. You can tell the raw development actually has changed quite a bit. This is what it was straight from the camera, and this is what we did with the raw development changes. Basically, just as I do with all my photographs, I just kind of separated the highlights from the shadows, really creating a nice sense of contrast. I like a good contrast in my photos, especially when I'm taking a photo that has a long exposure water effect like here. But this one is a little blown out, so as you're going to see when we go through the adjustments over here, we're going to bring back a little bit more detail here and kind of bring out a little bit more of the rich color here, and definitely bring out a little bit of the yellows that you can see here, and then a little bit of the oranges you can see back here. And if you're looking over on the side, you can see I have an erase image layer. I already turned that one off. But if you take a look up here, we have some people chilling on the bridge. Obviously, I don't want those people in the final photographs, so I just went ahead and erased those, and I'll turn that on here. So as you can see here, this is what the final photo looks like, but we'll go through that shortly after, but it erases them. So get that turned off here, and we're going to walk through the individual adjustments that I made here. So obviously you already see the raw development, and the only difference is, like, this is what it was when we first took the photo, this is what it is with those adjustments. But the next thing I always like to go into is the advanced contrast, because you can bring back a little bit more detail in here and kind of just actually bring in a lot of color too. It doesn't necessarily adjust saturation, but when you adjust the midtones, it really does bring out the color. So when I turn this on, you could already see the difference there. So that's without it, and then that's with it. And like I said, we're not adjusting color, saturation, or anything, but it really changes the yellows, that makes the green a little bit more rich. Yeah, and then even if you're looking at the waterfall here, it's not going to be drastic, but if I turn it off again and then turn it back on, you can see we're getting a little bit more detail back in that waterfall, since it is, I would say, probably just a little bit overexposed, but that's more of my personal touch. I really like to get the pure whites in the long exposures of waterfalls. So that's kind of what that does here. It just kind of lets you mess with the particular, like I said, the highlights, midtones, and shadows, mess with the contrast, just more advanced, as it would say in the title there. And if you're curious, I am using Luminar 3. I don't think it actually shows anywhere on the page itself, but that's the photo editing program that I prefer to use. I didn't mess with the top and bottom lighting. It looks pretty even. It's a little bit darker at the bottom, but I kind of like that. Kind of use these trees here to set the frame of the waterfall. So I didn't mess with that. I didn't even touch the actual saturation and vibrance, at least this slider. We do mess with the HSL slider, you can see down here, and that saturation I do mess with because it lets me specifically choose what kind of colors I want to adjust, but we'll get to that shortly after. The next one that I had adjusted is the split toning. Add a little bit of colors to the highlights and shadows. When you're looking here, this is with it on, this is with it off. It's very subtle, so I'm going to turn it back on again. You can see that there's a little bit more of a warmer tone, bringing out a little bit of the fall colors, just a little bit, without getting rid of the Pacific Northwest wet forest kind of vibe that's going on here. So that's why here you'll see in the shadows, I added a little bit of that, I guess you could call it a burnt orange, almost brownish hue. That's bringing in a little bit of that warmth, a little bit of the fall seasonal touch to this. But then in the shadows, I made sure to add a dark, rich green, which is going to continue to kind of bring through the wet forest vibes there. So that's the only thing I did here. For the most part, the balance is pretty split in between the shadows and highlights. That just means that we're going to have more highlights rather than the shadow adjustments in the split toning. I believe I slightly adjusted that a little towards the highlights, but it's still basically right in the middle. And again, I'll click that off and then on. Just a subtle touch, but it really helps create more of the vibe that we're going for here. And then when we get down to the HSL that I was talking about earlier, I'll click that on. And you can already see right there, we're really boosting those yellows and the oranges. If you take a look back here by the top of the last fall, because there's another waterfall right there, and then this is the waterfall that we took at the end, so you can kind of see that going through. But if you're looking right here, you can really see when I turn this off and then turn it back on, we're really boosting the oranges there. Brings in more of that fall atmosphere. Alright, then after we messed with the HSL, you can see the specific ones I did here. I could actually talk about those a little bit. So obviously, as I was talking about with the oranges back here, really boosted those, really wanted to make those pop. The yellows we boosted about half as much as the oranges, just because we didn't want to make these a little bit too vibrant. And when you are adjusting yellow, it's also going to affect all of the green as well, because there's always a little bit of yellow in green. But then we have the aqua and the blue. You see, because the green I didn't mess with, and I already liked the color that was coming through there. But the aqua and blue, we did adjust, and that's strictly for the water itself. But also the aqua, it's going to add a little bit of a base color to the green, the wet trees. So that was a nice addition that added. But then the blue was all about adding a little bit more atmosphere around the water itself. If I go ahead and click this off, you can see that there's not as much of like a mist effect happening. There's a little bit down here, but not a whole lot around the mid falls or even up here. But when we put this back on, we can see that there's a little bit more of a pronounced mist up here, a little bit more kind of flowing around the outside of the falls, but definitely kind of boosts it down here as well. So that was just a subtle little touch that we did there to just kind of boost that a little bit. But then to bring back again a little bit more detail in that waterfall, what I did is I used the polarizing filter, slid that up just a little bit, and as you can see there with that on, it adds a lot more detail. And then after that polarizing filter, what we did is we added a little bit of a vignette. I'll click this on. You're not going to see a whole lot of the dark, a dark ring going around because it's very subtle. But we just, because I could see, as you can see here with the tree frame that I'm using, it's already kind of dark, but it's only dark partially around here. So adding just this little bit of vignette, we just brought in a little bit of a dark frame, just kind of going around the top. But then we also added, as you can see here, just a slight touch of an inner light, which is going to be placed right here, right where our waterfall and our river is running off. And that's just going to add a little bit more of that draw into the photo, just kind of enhance the already the frame that we have here with the darkness and then the brightness here. We're just going to enhance that just a little bit. As you can see, I'll turn that off, turn that back on. It's a very subtle touch, but it just helps kind of draw you in just a little bit more. And then we just finished off with a little bit of structure and a little bit of sharpening. That's more for the social media side, because it kind of compresses the photo, makes it lose a little bit of that detail, a little bit of that sharpness. So I just boost that just a little bit for that particular purpose. But if you see here when I click the eye icon, this is what it looked like before we made any of the adjustments, and then here's where it's at now. You can see a lot more detail is back in the waterfall, a little bit here, but very much here on the outside. Again, I'll click that and then release it. You can see a lot more detail there. The colors of the trees, a little bit more of an autumn vibe kind of pulling through a little bit there. Obviously there's not a whole lot of the autumn orange or red or even yellow leaves or anything like that, but there's a little bit of the yellow that's coming through on these trees, and then definitely have a little bit more of that orange around the side here where there's some debris, some leaves, maybe a little bit of some ferns that are kind of turning a little bit more of a browner color. Yeah, and then we finished off this photo, like I said earlier, with just removing the people standing on the bridge just to clean it up just a little bit more. They were a little bit of a distraction, so I got those removed, and that really, again, rounds out the entire photo, what we had before, and then what we finished with. I'm gonna go ahead and get that second one pulled up, and we'll get started on that photo. All right, so here's the second one that we took. It wasn't one of my favorite ones, but it was fun trying to get this this photo to work out. Again, you can see I have certain ones turned off. Those are the ones that we already have the adjustments on, but if I scroll back up to the top, you can see here we already have the raw development, again just because I can't turn that off, but I could show you what the original photo looked like just by hitting this eye icon here. You can see it was a bit more brighter. There's a lot more of a mist or a haze coming off of the rapids and the falls just on the other side of this tree and rock here. So when I released that, you can see we darkened up the edges, again created that base contrast that we could work off of, which I always really like to do, and also makes the light that is hitting this moss covered branch, and this one just makes that pop just a little bit more by separating, like here where it's almost pure black, and then it has that nice light kiss that's going on the edges of the trees, just really highlighting that moss there. So obviously this isn't I would say a fantastic photograph, but it was more of a capturing of, I would say, textures. How we have this moss on the rock here, the different kind of veins, I would say, of the rock, then the moss hanging and dripping off of the branches, the long exposure we had here on the river, creating that drag effect. I was mostly wanting to capture this falls here, and then they had little I guess branches of themselves kind of going off there, but wasn't able to quite get anything to really work there. But I really liked this the wall, the earthen wall here, and then the trees kind of branching over and the rock here. Just again more of a textures photograph here, but I kind of walk through a little bit. I did not need to zoom in. Go fix that, go back to full screen. Well, again, we're going to start with that advanced contrast. I will turn that on, and you could already see the big difference there when I turn that off and when I turn that on. Again, just kind of dragging apart the highlights and the shadows, separating that different part, and then making the midtones also bringing out a little bit of color as well. Not too much though, because there is a whole lot of different variants of green here, so we don't need to make those pop anymore. But some of the other colors, again, you'll see when we get to the HSL part, we just kind of separate a little bit, made certain ones pop. So since we are having a lot of mist that's coming off the rapids and the waterfall, I did use a little bit of the dehaze slider here. I'll turn that on, and again that's just going to kind of cut through a little bit of that haze, adding actually a little bit more of a dark shadow vibe to that, just kind of cutting through. So when I turn that off, turn that on, it's mainly working out here in this open area where that mist is, just cutting through that a little bit and bringing back the true color. And just like the last photo, you're going to see that a running theme here. We're going to use the split tone to kind of adjust the color vibes of what's happening here without separating it too much from being true to what is actually there. So as you can tell, when I turn it off, turn it on, there's just again a slight variation, not very much, because as you can tell I have turned these mostly down. There is a slight little adjustment, nothing much. And then again the saturations, we're going to see the big difference here. Turn that on. Especially when you're looking here like at this rock, when I turn it off, it goes back to more of a muted green and then the mossy green. turn that on, you can see, oh, that's orange. So we brought out the oranges. I didn't touch the yellow and I didn't touch the green because that's going to really affect the moss itself, which already is very vibrant, it's very pronounced. So if I slid those up at all, it would just kind of be way oversaturated and not really match what's happening here. So again, I just added a little bit of the aqua, added a little bit of base to like these dark green trees, which also adds a little bit to the shadows as well of the water, and slid up the blue again just for that water. So when I click this off here, you can see there's really not a lot of color happening in the water. Specifically here, this is almost like a gray rather than any sort of blue or even green in the water. So when I added that HSL slider, we bring back a little bit of color there. It brings in a little bit of that aqua color. We're actually seeing a little bit of more color here too with the sliders, but definitely seeing a lot more color in the water, which helps balance out the photo. It just, with the way it was before, kind of looked like a bit of an empty space. Like I said, when I turn this off, it looks like there's really no color in this whole part of the photograph, besides just a little touches here and there with some rocks underneath the water. But then you have all this vibrant green from the moss, and then more of a darker but mid-tone kind of green over here. But then when we added that slider, it just went ahead and added color throughout, really balanced out the photo. And then again, just like the last waterfall edit, we used the polarizer just a little bit. When I flick this on and off, you won't tell too much of a difference, but it just brings back a little bit of color into this part of the falls and just a little bit of detail. Not a whole lot, so again, I only raised it to 8, but it does just add a little bit of color and a little bit of detail back to that area. We didn't add the vignette in this time. I really didn't see any need for it. And then again, we finished off with the structure and sharpening, again for that social media purposes where it compresses that photo. So again, this is what it looked like before, and then what it looks like after. You know, again, like I said, it's not a fantastic photo. It was again more of a tester. I wanted to see how well the camera could really capture the textures that are happening here, and as well all the different colors. So in that aspect, I enjoy this photo. Is it my favorite one? Am I gonna offer it as a print? No. But it was a fun little experiment, and we continued that experiment in the next photograph, which I'll bring up real quick. Alright, so here is that third photo that we took. This is one when I put on the 55 to 200 lens. It's also, I used the 55 to 200 lens in the first photo. Put that one back on. We're still at the same location. You could even see that this is the same rock that we just had that was taking up like the bottom whole, basically the bottom whole quarter of that last photo. You see I'm adding a little bit there, and I zoomed in here to try to capture a little bit more of this waterfall, and then the little tiny sections that have been kind of cut off, probably hit this rock, bounced off, and then kind of broke up wherever the veins of the rock let it flow. This is more of like an ethereal kind of photo here. Again, not one that I would necessarily offer as a print, just again a fun test. The long exposure on the waterfall back here actually made it kind of look a little bit more like mist, but again, we do have, if I scroll back up, we do have the raw developments still on. So when I hit this eye icon, you can see what it looked like before. You can tell that the raw developments just adjusted the basically the highlights, darken the shadows, again just separating that that contrast a little bit, but also lowering the highlights and whites just because they were a little bit too much. The falls were creating a lot of mist coming off that kind of muggied up, kind of hazed over the photo a little bit. But this part honestly right here is one of my favorites. It looks just like smoke. It doesn't look like water. It looks like a vapor rather than actual liquid water. Again, over here kind of looks the same, and then back here it looks more like a mist or fog is kind of flowing through the trees and the bushes. But in that aspect, really like this photo. I do like some of the textures on this rock, but again, not one that I would offer as like a print, more like the last photo that I would be more inclined to offer as a print if you guys are interested in that. But again, let's start with that advanced contrast here, have it selected, have it deselected. Again, just separating those highlights and shadows and making the midtones a bit more pronounced, bringing back a little bit of that color. You can see that here and a little bit over here. Again, when I turn that off and then I turn it back on, really just allows those midtones to have their own rightful part in the photograph here. but you've heard me talk a bunch about the contrast, so we'll go ahead and go on to the split toning again. I'm going to turn that on, and you'll just see it is subtle. It's never going to be too pronounced, and in fact in this one we remove a little bit of the orange that is in there, since a lot of this isn't shadow and we have a bit of the shadow coming in here. I did slide it more towards the highlights, but we're going to bring back those oranges when we get down to that HSL slider. But again, that just adds a little bit of a more warmer vibe to the highlights, and then also make sure that the shadows and a little bit of the midtones are still in that typical Pacific Northwestern kind of vibe there. And then again, HSL, click on that, and then you can see we brought back a little bit of those yellows, just a little bit. Again, really made sure that those oranges were coming through, didn't touch the green, moved the aqua up again for here, and then also adding a little bit of a deeper base to the more mid-tone and darker greens. And blue, again, just for the water. Again, when I click this off, you can see not much color happening here in the water. So with that aqua and that blue being turned on, we're bringing a little bit of that color back into it, balancing out that photo. Let's scroll through here a little bit. And again, didn't add any polarizer in this one. I liked the amount of white with the mist, and then also the little bit of details coming over these rocks. This looked really nice. And then finished it up again with that shadow and sharpening. So again, this is what it was before we made any adjustments. Here's what it's at after. Really nice pop of yellow up here, where all of this is kind of a very similar color. Makes that really pop nice. Brought back a little bit of the highlights on top of the rock, the moss colors, the variants in the moss colors, and adds a splash of color down here as well as in the river. Really kind of rounded out this photo. I made it, in a way, almost kind of saved it because I wasn't very happy with it when I first took the photo, but there are certain things about it that I really do like. But the last one was the best photo of this trip. Again, if you guys didn't watch the actual on location video, I suggest you do. It was really fun, especially all the different kind of angles you could get of the same falls here. So if you didn't watch that video, check it out, but I'm gonna get that last photo pulled up real quick. All right, so we're back with the last one, and like I said, this was my favorite one. If it's not your favorite one, let me know what your favorite one is down in the comment section below, or just say, yeah, it's your favorite, because this one looks fantastic. Very ethereal with the water here, the mist coming off of it, really nice, but then also I do really like the surrounding supportive elements, the really, again, framing that waterfall itself. And we're going to make some adjustments again to bring out, you can see that there's a lot of debris off the side here, but really bring out the colors there just to round out the entire board here. But I'm going to go ahead and hit this eye icon, show you what it looked like straight out of the camera. So you could see with the highlights that we adjusted, we just brought that down just a little bit. It was a little bit too bright. And then of course the dark areas, we made sure that those were still containing the pure blacks. Like if you're looking right over here, it is pure black, but when I hit the eye icon, you can see it's a little bit darker. There's not as much detail on that side of that rock. So with the adjustments, we brought up the shadows just a touch, not much at all, but made sure those blacks were still pure black. So we brought a little bit more detail back to some of the shadows without losing that pure black area. And then of course the advanced contrast, turn that on, and you could really see where that mid-tone comes into shine there, as it is already bringing back a lot of that color. You don't see a whole lot of change with the shadow sections. They keep that pure black, but you do see a bit more detail coming through in that waterfall without losing some of that ethereal aspects. And then again, split toning. I want to keep your eye on over here, just see if we can bring back a little bit of some of those colors, and we bring back the greens of the wet Pacific Northwest, but we're not losing any of that orange color, but we're definitely going to boost that when we get to the HSL section. I'm just checking on the timer on the camera here. Yeah, so that really nice, just adds a little bit of that wet saturated green without losing the oranges. And then click here, bring back those oranges, make them pop, make the yellow pop, especially the little flowers we have here, the highlights on the mossy trees over here. And this is also going to add a little bit of a higher would say, contrast and detail a little bit to these trees over here. As you can see, some of them have a little bit of some orange needles and whatnot. They're coming through, a little bit of a yellow tree coming through back there. So again, if I turn that off, you can tell that those details are there, but they're not as pronounced. Definitely not as pronounced of the the leaves that have fallen over here. But again, you turn that on, just boost that just the touch that it needs. We do add just a little bit of that polarizer filter. Again, just bring back a little bit of color in here, a little bit of detail, not a whole lot, but mostly the color. Plus, we've already talked about the colors here, so I'm gonna skip those. Aqua and blue for the water. The aqua also creates a little bit of a base in the shadow of those trees. And then we just finish up with a bit of that structure and sharpening. This is what the original photo looked like straight out of the camera, and here's what we have now. Really, really fun. Really like this one. If you guys would be interested in this as a photo print that you guys can purchase, help support me, let me know down in the comment section below, and I would love to offer that up for you guys. But also let me know what your favorite photo was, if you really like the second or the third one, because again, I wasn't a huge fan, but I think they could definitely be improvements, but there were aspects that I really like on those ones. But yeah, let me know. Hit that like button, subscribe if you enjoy these. We will be back next Wednesday with an on location video, and then try to continue that schedule as best as we can with my work schedule that's basically having me work both days during the weekend every other week. So we kind of will have to be a little flexible, but I'll definitely let you guys know what to expect in the on location videos. So make sure you're subscribing, hit that bell notification, comment and like, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.